Hello, yes. How are you all doing? My name is Lamar Wilson. I am the CEO and CTO of Hydro. I am so happy to be here to see distributed grow like this. I believe I was at the very first distributed trade, and this is just amazing. But today we have a wonderful panel of esteemed panelists, so I'll let them introduce themselves and tell a little bit about the company they're with, starting with Eric.
Yeah, so hi everybody, I'm Eric Zhang, because we have another Eric here. So previously, I was a founder of DoraHacks. It's the largest hackathon organizer and hacker community in China. Today I'm representing TrueChain. It's a hybrid consensus public chain infrastructure we're building globally.
Eric P, after Eric Z, Eric Piscini. Up to 2 weeks ago, I was the global leader for blockchain for Deloitte. And 2 weeks ago, I decided to go on the dark side of the startup. So I started a new company with some of my clients, and nothing to do with financial services. But I'm still happy to talk about this because it's been my passion for 11 years. Thank you for having me.
My name is Tor Baer. I'm the head of growth and marketing for a company called Enigma. We focus on private smart contracts. Essentially, we call them secret contracts. And our goal is to create and enable scalable, end-to-end, decentralized applications. So I'm thrilled to be here. Finance is one of the big verticals that we think a lot about. There is a huge need for privacy of, say, consumer information. There's a lot of different applications for blockchain and these other sort of decentralized technologies, and I'm looking forward to talking a bit about that and learning from the other panelists as well.
Hi, I'm Lawrence. I'm from NanoPay. We're in a slightly different space to some of these guys. We are a regulator-friendly, bank-friendly, and central bank-friendly platform, and our end game is to create an electronic risk-free claim against the central bank. So digitizing or tokenizing fiat money.
So thank you all, I appreciate it. And I know you said you came over to the dark side, but we would like to say you came over to the light.
From the dark side.
Yeah, from the dark side. No, but it was awesome you guys introducing yourselves. So this is about the enterprise and how are we actually moving into the enterprise. I know even a year ago, a lot of these enterprise solutions were not even going into production. Right? So my question is, what problem are you all solving for the enterprise? And then how is that problem, how can you get the enterprise to move into production? Anybody can take that. Like, what problem are you solving for the enterprise? And then how are you all getting the enterprise to move from the solution into production?
Okay, let me go first. For TrueChain, we are building 2 chains actually. We have a permission chain ready right now. It's based on our PBFT protocol, and we have a whole set of product grid that supports enterprises to upload their smart contract and manage their smart contract on our platform. On this part, we're working with local banks in China to solve problems ranging from supply chain and online payment. And for public chain side, we are building the hybrid consensus protocol, which supports public chain infrastructure. And I will give 2 examples of our collaborators in the industries. One is we have very extensive partnership with the digital advertising industry. One of the collaborators is called Juice Chain. It was a digital advertising company backed by the European Wallenberg family, and they have DSP, ADX, and SSP platforms in Latin America and Africa. And one of the problems they're solving is to provide transparency in the digital advertising industry, because the whole industry was going down over the past few years. And they want to use blockchain to provide transparency into this industry. And what we're doing is from very primitive side, like hashing these transactions into blockchains and gradually build more complicated applicational scenarios. And the other example is we work with Sunshine Insurance Company in China. It's a state-owned enterprise, and they have a chain called Shanchain, and Shanchain is building a mutual insurance smart contract. And in this case, we're talking about removing the intermediaries of the whole insurance industry, where people have to sell a lot, and the trust is not always there. So what they're providing is they're building up a smart contract for mutual insurance, and people donate their token or ETH to this pool of money, and when anything happens, the smart contract is giving back money directly to the person, and that is now restricting to accidents on flights and on ships. So that's another scenario where we use blockchains to reduce intermediary cost.
Awesome.
So I think we have to remember one thing about blockchain, maybe two. It's bigger than you think, and it's harder than you think, right? So those two things are really, really true. What it means is you don't get there overnight, right? You cannot get to something that is bigger and harder than you do today overnight. So based on that, you have to come up with a process to get to the decentralized business model, the new blockchain platform, the new technology that you're going to use. It's not easy. When you talk to large organizations, that is very hard for them to accept the notion of decentralized business models. And so usually what we see in the market, what I was seeing when I was at Deloitte, what I see now as a startup is the creation of consortium, the creation of association alliances for people to join and build those platforms together in the future. And that's a good process to think about it, not to do that on your own, but to do that with the rest of your ecosystems. I think that's a very good lesson learned from what we've seen in the...
And that's how you feel like we can move into production if many of these entities begin to come together in these consortiums, because then those entities will already be working together, and all you're doing is putting technology in to enable that even more so. Gotcha.
Everybody can run a blockchain in a lab. The hard piece is to run the same blockchain in production, in a live environment with your competitors, clients, suppliers.
Right, right.
Yeah, I want to build on that because those are excellent points. So it's hard to sell a business on maybe like a blockchain and say, use a blockchain if they don't understand it. It's hard to sell them on decentralization if they rely on being a centralized institution. What you can sell somebody on is value that you create for them that nobody else can. And if you can frame it in those terms, then you have success. If you just say, we're selling you a new kind of blockchain, they'll say, we tried blockchain, it didn't work. When Enigma, we wrote our white paper back in like early 2015. The space was a little bit different. We were approaching enterprise. Enterprise wasn't really ready for these solutions. And to be honest, we weren't really ready to provide what they would have wanted. Now we're 3 years later, the situation is very different. When we talk to enterprise, they understand what we're doing because they understand the importance of privacy. And I'll make a slightly bold claim and then a more bold claim. Slightly bold claim is smart contracts and blockchain without a privacy solution are basically useless for enterprise. And my slightly bolder claim is that blockchains and smart contracts that don't have privacy solutions are useless for everybody. So when we talk to organizations and they're thinking about how do we reduce our data liability or how can we increase data sharing across organizations, across borders, that's the type of solution that Enigma is solving. We start from where can we provide unique value that's not solved by current innovations in the space? What can we build for you that no one else can? And there we get a really good response. We recently joined the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. We joined the Decentralized Identity Foundation. As you're saying, like joining together with these other projects and companies and these multinationals. We want to solve these problems. We know we don't do it alone. We know that we require, numerous partners to make any sort of progress, develop standards, and so on. So I think you're going to see a lot more. I don't think you're going to see blockchain, just the word, thrown around as much as we do like blockchain-enabled solutions, and you'll see the focus specifically on those solutions, what they are, what the implementation looks like, and how it's being used globally.
Yeah, so we've been live since June 2016. While our end game is to deliver digital fiat to central banks, we do cross-border business-to-business retail and P2P payments today. And those, you know, we've seen enterprises, in particular banks, really take this up in a pretty significant way. If you look at Nostro Vostro in cross-border payments, there's something like $10 trillion sitting in those accounts that is just wasted trapped capital. And that costs banks, in terms of credit risk and also currency risk, about $180 billion a year. So if we can strip out $180 billion of cost to banks, we can transform banks. And we're doing that today. So for example, in Canada, we did a deal with Interac, which is the local debit rail in Canada, that gives us access to 99.8% of all bank accounts in Canada to send money through a platform that they're already familiar with, their own bank app, to India, China, and the United States first. But we have another 92 countries that we're working on at the moment. So, you know, we spent most of our time over the last few years actually focused on scale. And today our platform is scaled. We can do 50,000 transactions per second. And we don't need billions of dollars of hardware like other faster payments platforms. In the UK, they can do 2,500 transactions per second. And that's £1 billion of hardware. Ours is on a single AWS server. So we've got to a point where we can do scale, and we are commercial now, and we are adding real value right now.
So given that, right, what are the particular challenges you've seen? Because I understand, you know, from what we do, there are some challenges that might not necessarily be completely technical challenges that you have to overcome. So what are some of the particular challenges you've seen in trying to implement this technology into these enterprises? The session is called Transforming the Landscape, and the only way you can transform something, you have to change it. So what do you all think the challenges are that you all have seen in trying to implement this technology, like anyone?
Well, so I think the number one thing is talent. Where do you find the people to actually work on those projects? This is pretty hard to find. And they move around pretty quickly between different companies. Mm-hmm. So I think to me, the number one challenge when you build a blockchain solution is where do you find the right talent? We talked earlier today about regulatory challenges. In the US, outside of the US, across borders, we have a lot of challenges. We just talked about the business case. How do you make the right business case in an organization to make sure that the people are going to use the blockchain the right way? And I think you have, you know, I joke sometimes and I say, okay, in the Bitcoin world or in the Ethereum world, no one is picking up the phone when something goes wrong, right? You can't do that in an enterprise. You have to have someone to support you if something is not working. And the operational aspect of those platforms is going to be very critical to put in place before we actually go live. So I think those are a few points that I would mention.
Anyone else?
Yeah, from our perspective, the two things that are the biggest challenges are the regulatory environment is the first thing, and the second thing is cybersecurity risk. And it doesn't matter how much work you do in the latter, it never ever goes away because there are always just as many nefarious people out there trying to do dodgy things and hack your platform. So you can almost spend endless time building the most secure thing on the planet, and you just need to get hacked once, and your reputation and everything goes with it. So the only thing that really keeps me up at night is the cybersecurity risk. I think our platform is very, very robust, but like everything, it will at some point get hacked, and we are planning and organizing for that time. And we've seen it in just about every blockchain solution that's been hacked at some point in time. And then when we look at the regulatory environment, at the moment in Canada, we're regulated by 34 different regulators. So this is not an insignificant task, and it's a big component of what we do. In fact, after our people, and we do spoil our people, so I call them spoiled children, to hang on to them, as to Eric's point, you really have to spoil them. After paying them a huge amount of money and giving them a great environment and lots of benefits, the next biggest cost is our legal fees. And that's because we operate, you know, we have so many different regulators, and we've got to spend most of our time with lawyers.
I'm glad at least that the challenge is not what it used to be for us, which is that people didn't believe in the technology at all. People didn't believe there was any potential. People didn't understand that decentralized distributed solutions were appropriate for enterprise. That challenge, I think, is passed. I think we've at least established that value. Now what we're finding is if you've explored blockchain or decentralized solutions in the past, you didn't like it. We're running into people who, they've tried it, but they worked with the wrong people, or they thought of the wrong business problem, they attacked it from the wrong angle, and you're trying to sell them a new solution, and you're like, no, you have to think about it from this perspective, you have to be using this meaningfully different technology, you have to be solving this different problem that blockchain is more appropriate for, and to get them to overcome this bias that's formed over the last few years, we were in this very strange period between buying into the technology and what's going to happen, I can't say a year or two or whatever from now when we actually have more of these solutions deployed at scale. We're still in that valley where people want to see it work before they do it themselves. So I'm hoping that challenge passes. I'm hoping we're one of the companies that starts to demonstrate this value at scale. We're already having the right conversations, and we talk with people, as you said, who have the talent, who are very focused on these problems, who want to innovate specifically on distributed technology. So hopefully we can start demonstrating that kind of value soon, and it's not such a hurdle for somebody to come to us and say, we just haven't seen it done right, so we don't want to do it ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think we have gone through the process where at the beginning, enterprise didn't believe in blockchain technology at all, and they are now mostly interested in the blockchain technology. But from my perspective, the biggest challenge for enterprise adoption is the design of token economy. So you can always tokenize something, and you can always build some coupons into tokens, and you can also build some simple smart contracts. But the biggest challenge is for enterprises, they have their own business model. How can you put this business model together with a new token economy concept? Because on blockchains, the most interesting part comes from the token economy. But token economy is not familiar with most of the companies, and I found them to be very hard to think about token economies. So I think business model or token economy model on blockchains will be the top challenge in the next 2 or 3 years for enterprises.
I think that is, you all hit it from all different angles. It's amazing. Listen, we didn't even practice this panel. These guys are just awesome. Here's another question. I want to focus on one particular challenge, and that's talent. Like you said, you guys, it's almost like what do you call it? Can't think of the game we used to play where you switch chairs. Anyway.
Musical chairs.
Musical chairs.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. You switch chairs. And musical chairs, it's like musical chairs for developers. And so how are you guys facing that challenge? I know there are a few classes out there, but how are you facing that? Because right now, if you're a developer, you are making top dollar to work on blockchain because all of these companies are competing for you. So how are you guys overcoming that challenge, and how can some of these enterprises out here get into the musical chair game and make sure that they hold on to their developers? How are you guys doing that?
It's actually a new version of musical chair, because usually you remove chairs from the game.
Right.
Here we
You're
add
adding more
chairs every
chairs.
day, right?
And there's not enough people to sit in them. Yeah.
So we add new companies, new interesting platforms and projects,
Right.
and you have less people to actually sit on them, right? So the scarcity is on the people, not on the chairs.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think you have to do 3 things. The first one is, of course, you have to give them a good package and all of that, right? I think the interest of the project that you're building is critical. You need to give them an opportunity to work on something that is really core to what blockchain will deliver, whether it's a very specific token, a utility token, which is what we are building, something that makes sense for the company, but something that makes sense for the world, right? I think people today, and I would argue forever, but people more today are interested about projects who are changing the world, right? So compensation, changing the world, and then leadership. I think you have to remember that leadership in the world of blockchain is not that different from any kind of leadership. You need to have strong leadership to everybody who's joining the different projects. And you see that in a lot of different ways. Ethereum has a very unique way of providing leadership. We can talk about it forever. But I think you need that leadership. You have to remember that. It's not just putting people together.
Right.
Yeah, so I help to manage and grow our developer community for Enigma because we're a platform. You build on top of Enigma, you build these decentralized applications. So we have tons of conversations with developers, not because we're hiring them, but because we want to convince them that this is the right platform to be exploring. And there's a couple things that we've noticed. For the developers who are really passionate about this and they really want to build a kind of decentralized application, they're super frustrated with some of the state of the space in terms of like the tribalism, the noise, the inability to find the right information. It's hard for them to find the right development resources. Some things are very Ethereum centric, some things are too vague. We're making it too hard for talent to get the resources they need. I worry about, the pipeline, like how do we convince people to now build on Enigma, build on Ethereum, build wherever they need to, as opposed to just go hang out at Facebook for 4 or 5 years and get some options. And like, the incentive needs to be there to build. It really does. Blockchain is all about incentives. It's about aligning incentives, and I don't think we've quite done it. But as you're saying, like there's been some successes. I actually am seeing. You're saying like not enough people are coming into the room. That's true. But they are coming in, and the room is getting bigger, and the visibility that you get now joining this space is completely different than it was a couple of years ago. So I'm bullish, I guess I would say, on talent entering the space, whether we can incentivize them, not just in terms of compensation, but in giving them meaning. Like, you're going to build a meaningful business solution. Well, we need to have applications at scale. We need enterprise adoption. You tell a developer that, they'll work for you. You tell them that it's going to be a proof of concept that just sits in an academic institution. Eventually, that's just not going to be compelling for anybody. So, I don't know, it's up to us.
Yeah, two things from my side. The first thing is I think location really matters. I wouldn't put your business in San Francisco, and I wouldn't put it in New York because the competition with bigger companies that have got so much money to throw around just makes it impossible. I think the second thing is I think the average developer has an attention span half-life of like 6 months, and I think in our space it's more like a month. So you actually need to have really fast cycles and get things to market super quickly so they can pound their chest and say, I did that, I took something to market. And never ever mention demo. If you're asking someone to build a demo, like everyone just tunes out straight away. So you can never mention demo, and even proof of concept, as you've heard, is not the best thing to be building. You want to be building real solutions, and you've got to get them into market fast, because if you don't get them in market fast, they've already lost interest and gone on elsewhere. Yeah.
So because I'm also a founder of a hacker community, so I would say the hacker movement come together with the blockchain movement because blockchains, you have open source projects and you have hackers building on top of that. So these two things come together. So I think technically hackers will be very important to this blockchain project. But I would divide this question into two parts. If you want to you want to build an application or you want to build an infrastructure. So if you want to build an application, it's easier for you to find people who can just write a smart contract. But the harder part is you have to find a team to operate, and you have to have a team to design the token economy and so on. So the challenge is on the business part. Mostly, and also the product. And if you're building an infrastructure, like you are building a consensus or you're building a public chain, and the human resource to design and actually implement the infrastructure will be very scarce. So, for example, if you want to design a consensus, probably you'll have to find some professors that have many years of experience doing the research in relevant areas, relevant fields, and so on. And in terms of the actual implementation, you have to find the right agency and also right PhDs and so on to actually work on that. And when you build the infrastructure, you actually have two parts. You have the research team and you have the engineering team. And you want to have top engineers, which could be top hackers or top engineers from big companies previously, but also you want to have top researchers from institutions in academia. So I think that is the challenging part for these two things, both application and the infrastructure builders.
So to leave 5 minutes, what we'll do is for this last 5 or 6 minutes, I want you guys to talk about the future. Like, in a perfect world, what would you like blockchain to be in the enterprise? Where do you see your companies in the next 5 years? Do you see grander adoption? Do you see a slower up ramp, or do you see like this moonshot, right? What do you all see from the enterprise sector? I know what you've already said. It's slow. It takes time. But the gentleman on the end said, I'm already running. So I want to hear what you guys have to say about the future. What's the next 5 years look like for you guys?
Okay, I'll go first.
Yeah.
From our side, we recognize that central banks creating a digital fiat is not a short-term goal. So we think that is in the 2 to 5 year time frame, and maybe we'll have 1 or 2 central banks pushing those boundaries. While we can solve the problems today with our solution, they're just the most conservative people on the planet. So what we're doing right now in our cross-border and our B2B space, and also in our capital markets business, is gathering credentials and proving the scalability, the performance, the reliability of our platform. And it's our intention to be able to use all those credentials to be able to do those deals with the central banks in the future. So I think for us, it is about taking everything we're doing today and doing it in many more geographies, many more currencies, and at a much greater scale. And I think if we can get some big wins in the next couple of years, there will be central banks that will be prepared to use our technology.
Yeah, we know our own roadmap, right? Like, we know where we want to be in 2 years, and we want to know what we want to be building, whether it's adopted or not. There's a lot of forces that are outside of our control, so we control what we can. But there's a few things that we've been right about a few things already. I'm not taking credit, not like just like I was right, but like I think I've heard the same things often enough, and people were right that blockchain was going to get more of a look from enterprise. It was going to increase in adoption. We'd get to the proof of concept phase. We'd be pushing toward deployment. I think we also predicted the backlash. We predicted that there would be this cycle where people said, this doesn't do what you promised. This doesn't actually decentralize anything. You've got all the problems of centralized solutions married with all of the awful problems of decentralized solutions, and now we have something much worse. So we anticipated that backlash as well. Now we're anticipating that the next step of the conversation is going to be around, okay, so how do we fix it? It's not enough to say, it didn't work. Of course it's going to work. Something is going to work. Somebody probably on this stage, probably all of us, are going to succeed at getting something deployed at scale. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge to get to that point. I can't say when this is going to happen. I hope it happens. We've got stuff coming this year. That's what I can say about us. But I think the next stage in the conversation is how do we solve scalability? How do we solve privacy issues for enterprise? We're working on both. I hope that people see that we're reaching solutions, not just problems.
So the new company that I just joined is called Citizens Reserve, and we are changing the way we think about supply chain in the world. And we want to use blockchain to enable supply chain networks to operate more efficiently and more transparently, again, across the globe. And we want to do that industry by industry. We don't want to do that for everybody at the same time. It's too big. We want to do this industry by industry. So my prediction is that we are sometimes we say blockchain is the democratization of trust, right? And so what we are trying to do is to democratize blockchain for supply chain. I think that's what we are ultimately targeting to do in the next 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think in the next 3 or 5 years, we will have centralized applications together with decentralized applications. I would say there will be 2 types of enterprises. The first type will be changing their original business model and combine with with some token economy model or with some decentralized application scenarios. So those kind of applications will be derived from the original business model, and it could go from anything between tokenization and payment and other situations. And there will be another type of enterprises where they totally embrace token economy. And what they will be doing is they will do ICOs and they will totally put their business model or even non-business model, just token economy on the blockchain. But I would say the real opportunity lies in the fact that because previously for the 3,000 years, we always had centralized solutions for every problem in the world. And we only have a few years to explore these decentralized solutions. So the real opportunity lies in the fact that we have nothing existing in the world that relates to the decentralized applications. So we have a big space to imagine, but we're not very used to it. But still we have a big opportunity on that.
Right. And I think for everyone out there, I think one of the things when thinking about the future innovation, if you think about the internet, the companies that gain the most, that have the most value now that use the internet are probably companies that could not have existed without the internet. And I think the same thing is going to happen with blockchain. I think the companies that will be the most valuable in the future are companies that could not have existed without the use of blockchain technology. So as you guys are thinking about things, always ask yourself, can I use a database? Like literally ask yourself that over and over again, can I use a database? Because if you can use a database, there's no reason to use blockchain and you're not really going to move the needle that much. But make sure you start creating solutions that you actually need a blockchain for, and I think those will add the most value, and these guys are all doing it.
Yeah, I think that's a good question, but I think you have to ask yourself two questions at the same time. You have to say, can I do what I'm trying to do with the database? If the answer is yes, do it with the database. But you also have to ask yourself, what if I could do something different with blockchain?
Right.
So there is a cost effectiveness play, right, which is I can do it with the database, but there is a revenue generation play, which is enabled by the blockchain technology. And we have to remember that. This is where the revolution is going to come from.
Yeah, I think the database part is just more around like sharing, right? It's more around what kind of information are you trying to share and who's going to validate that information. Right. If it's one single entity and you centralize it, there's no reason to have a blockchain. Yeah. And that's what I was getting into. It's like, what things are you going to change that are different than your normal setup right now? So we got a few minutes for questions. Oh, got one already. Do we have a mic? You might just have to belt it out. Oh, there we go. Here comes the mic. The mics are coming from the back.
All right. So regarding the talent musical chairs discussion, is there any suggestion for those of us that are freelance blockchain development shops how to attract enterprise talent? Because it's a two-sided market. It's a two-sided problem.
Repeat the question. He
Sure.
He said, how do we as freelance developers, blockchain developers, attract companies to hire us for the most part, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Talk to me.
He needs you now.
I need more technical resources. So I think you can go to all the major alliances, right? The EEA, the Hyperledger, and more, and participate in those events, in those alliances, and identify a lot of opportunities to engage with some large organizations. You can also go to, the public-facing large banks, large insurance companies who are doing this. If you're in insurance, for example, I would invite you to connect with an organization called RiskBlock, and they are trying to build insurance platforms on blockchain for the entire industry in the US, and you should talk to them because they need a lot of resources to build their team. So you have a lot of opportunities to do that today. I was not expecting that question. I think to me that's no one is looking for jobs today when you're in that space, right? Yeah.
He said, just put it on your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah. There we go.
Right here in the front. Oh, there's someone back there. Yeah. Okay. First one.
So my question is also for Eric Piscini. So what are the industries that you see that are more likely to adopt as an industry-wide or association-wide for blockchain, platforms or applications or what have you? And what are the metrics that you use to evaluate which industries are more prepared to adopt the distributed tech?
I think it's an interesting. That's for me or for you? Which
Which
Eric?
Eric?
For Deloitte.
Eric P.
All right.
Well, for both, actually. I'm sure both of you
both.
could
Good
provide
for you.
insight. Thank you.
I'd say it's an interesting question because you can ask that question about any technology innovation, right? So which industries are more likely to adopt technology innovation than others? And I would say three things. One is the most broken, right? The industries where the potential for improvements are the biggest. And insurance is a good example of that. Insurance has historically underinvested into technology compared to banking, for example. And so today the insurance industry is catching up. And one way to catch up is to adopt blockchain. So that's one way to look at it. I think the second way to look at it is where the value created is going to be the biggest. And here I would say it's not probably by industry, it's more by consortium, like we talked earlier, right? Which consortium will be able to create a platform where all market participants can join and extract value for themselves. I think that's another way to look at it. And they might cut across different industries, right? The platform we are building on supply chain is of course a manufacturing supply chain platform, but it's also a trade finance and insurance platform, because as soon as you start moving product and services, you also can insure them, right? So that's number three. I think number four is the completely new things coming from the technology space. And today you haven't heard much about the Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon of the world for good reasons. But I'm expecting them to come up with very unique ways of doing business because blockchain is available. So maybe a mix of things, but hopefully that helps.
And I'm sorry, but the timer has run out. So any questions, I'm sure all of these gentlemen will feel free to answer any questions you all have. Thank you all, and please stick around.
Thank you.
Thank you.